This is Reuters.
And despite the Russia.
Donald Trump on Friday told reporters he found it easier to deal with Russian President Vladimir Putin than Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. And he said he believed the Russian leader, who launched an unprovoked attack on Ukraine more than 3 years ago, when Putin said he sought peace.
Yeah, no, I believe him. I think we're doing very well with Russia. But right now they're bombing the hell out of Ukraine. I'm finding it more difficult, frankly, to deal with Ukraine. And they don't have the cards.
Earlier on Friday, the U.S. president had raised the prospect of imposing large-scale sanctions on Russia. It comes after a Reuters report earlier this week that the White House was preparing to give Russia possible sanctions relief as part of the push to end the war and improve diplomatic and economic ties with Moscow.
If you didn't have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3 days, I heard it from Putin.
3 years of solid support for Ukraine was erased exactly 1 week ago in a shouting match in the Oval Office between Trump and Zelensky. Trump afterward canceled U.S. support for Ukraine and ended the sharing of crucial intelligence, measures that stunned allies across Europe and were met with approval in Moscow. Officials in Washington and Kiev have tried to patch things up since, and a U.S. delegation is set to meet with counterparts from Ukraine for talks in Saudi Arabia next week. Trump has continued to suggest Ukrainian leaders need to prove they are serious about ending the war they did not start.
As you know, we're meeting in Saudi Arabia on sometime next week, early. And we're talking, I find that in terms of getting a final settlement, it may be easier dealing with Russia, which is surprising because they have all the cards. I mean, they're bombing the hell out of them right now.
The loss of American support comes at a crucial time for the Ukrainian military. Russian forces have almost surrounded thousands of Ukrainian troops who stormed into Russia's Kursk region last summer. Open-source maps show a Russian counteroffensive has nearly cut the Ukrainian force in Kursk in two and separated the main group from its principal supply lines. European leaders pledged on Thursday to stand by Ukraine and spoke of a new era of military preparedness spurred by Russia's invasion and Donald Trump's abandonment of what had once been a U.S. ally in Kiev.
We want a peace through strength. And this is the reason why I present today to the leaders the Rearm Europe plan.
EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at the summit in Brussels and described her vision of rearming Europe and supplying Ukraine with weapons.
It gives the member states possibility to invest in the Ukrainian defense industry or to procure military capabilities that go right away to Ukraine.
We made a strong signal to Ukrainian people, to Ukrainian warriors, to civilians, to all our families. And it's great that we are not alone. We feel it and we know it. Thank you so much for everything.
According to NATO, Washington provided more than 40% of military aid sent to Ukraine last year.
If you didn't have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3 days, I heard it from Putin. In 3 days.
But President Donald Trump abruptly ended that arms supply following an Oval Office shouting match with Zelensky last week that led to a reversal in American support and stunned American allies. In the days since, that shock has hardened into new resolve, driven by fears that Russia, emboldened by its war in Ukraine, may attack an EU country next, and that Europe cannot rely on the U.S. to come to its aid. In a televised address on the eve of the summit, French President Emmanuel Macron said, quote, "I want to believe that the United States will stand by us, but we have to be ready if that is not the case." And in a sign of the gravity of the moment, Macron said that France was open to discussing extending the protection offered by its nuclear arsenal to its European partners. Moscow said Macron's speech contained notes of what it called, quote, nuclear blackmail. The French proposal was met with mixed reaction from other nations.
I think it's a very interesting idea, and we see to this proposal with high expectations because, nuclear umbrella would serve as really very serious deterrence towards Russia.
That was Lithuania's President Gitanas Nausėda.
Wir sind in der NATO miteinander verbündet. Dazu gibt es
German Chancellor Olaf Scholz stressed the need to keep the U.S. involved.
Donald Trump on Thursday signed an executive order establishing a U.S. cryptocurrency reserve. It will be capitalized with Bitcoin seized by the federal government as part of criminal or other legal proceedings. That was according to a post on X by Washington crypto czar David Sachs. Trump is then expected to formally announce the plan at a crypto summit Friday in the White House. Earlier this week, he named the 5 digital assets to feature in the reserve: Bitcoin and Ether, and smaller tokens XRP, Solana and Cardano. However, it's still not clear how the reserve will work or what benefits it will offer to taxpayers. Sachs said the federal government would try to maximize the value of its holdings while offering few further details. He said the US would not sell any Bitcoin deposited in the reserve, but would keep it as a store of value. Sachs called the reserve a digital Fort Knox. Trump came to power promising to be a crypto president. He has since appointed fans of digital assets to key positions. But Bitcoin has given up most of the gains made since his election win, with some investors disappointed by a lack of concrete moves on the sector. On Thursday, one told Reuters the new plan was the most disappointing outcome possible. With the reserve set to do no active trading, he said it was just a fancy name for crypto funds already held by the government. Bitcoin fell over 5% immediately following Sachs's social media posts.
That's all for now.